What does it mean to exist? Most of us would say it's simple. If you breathe, you exist. If your heart beats, you are alive. But history tells a more dangerous story. There was a time when existence wasn't proven by science, but by paper, memory, and agreement. A time when the law could erase you, without ever touching your body. Tonight's case is not about murder. There was no weapon, no blood, yet the law still killed a man. This is the true story of Jean-Marie Dupont, a man declared dead while still walking the earth. And once the law buried him, it nearly refused to let him return. Our story begins in the twilight years of the 19th century, in the quiet, often overlooked villages of rural France. This was a world fundamentally different from our own, a world long before the sophisticated technologies we now take for granted. There were no digital fingerprints, no vast databases of DNA, no instantaneous global communication. In this era, a person's identity wasn't proven by cold, hard science, but by a far more fragile and human element: recognition. You literally were who others said you were. Your entire existence depended on the collective memory of your community, on a few scattered paper documents, and on simple social acknowledgement. It was a beautiful yet terrifyingly vulnerable system, ripe for error, ripe for a mistake that could erase a human being completely. Our central figure in this haunting narrative is Jean-Marie Dupont. He was born into an unremarkable working-class family, his early life following a predictable, often arduous path. Like countless young men of his time, his destiny seemed shaped by the harsh realities of poverty, the relentless demands of manual labor, and the ever-present limitations of opportunity. The fields, the small local workshops, these were the boundaries of his world. But the spirit of youth, combined with economic necessity, often pushes people beyond familiar horizons. And so, like many others, Jean made the momentous decision to leave his hometown. He set out into the wider world, driven by the desperate hope of finding better employment, a chance at a more stable life. His journey took him from factory to factory, from one demanding job to another, a transient existence common for the working poor. He became one of the countless wanderers, an anonymous face in the burgeoning industrial landscape. It was, in fact, incredibly common for men like Jean to simply vanish for extended periods, for months or even years. Letters were a luxury, expensive and often unreliable, especially for those constantly on the move. Communication was often sporadic, if it happened at all. For many, sheer survival took precedence over maintaining contact, over writing home. Jean for a time did send letters. They were sporadic, brief updates from distant towns, reassurances that he was still alive, still striving. But then, as happens with the slow erosion of distance and time, the letters stopped. Entirely. At home, his family and friends, initially concerned, slowly watched that worry give way to a weary resignation. They had heard countless stories, witnessed similar disappearances. The grim assumptions began to settle in. Perhaps he had started a new life, found a new identity in a new town, or far more tragically, met an unfortunate, anonymous end in some forgotten corner of industrial France. Life, as it relentlessly does, moved forward for those left behind. Jean-Marie Dupont became a fading memory, his name whispered less and less often, eventually settling into silence. But for Jean, his true ordeal was only just beginning. The law, with its blind administrative power, was about to write a new, terrifying chapter for him, one that would challenge the very definition of life, death, and what it means to exist. Years passed since Jean-Marie Dupont's last letter, years since his name was last spoken with certainty in his home village. The world continued its slow, inexorable march. Then, on the desolate outskirts of a neighboring region, a grim discovery was made. The remains of a human body, badly decomposed, were unearthed. This was a profoundly challenging situation for the authorities of the late 19th century. Without any of the modern forensic tools we rely on today, no DNA analysis, no fingerprint databases, no comprehensive dental records, identifying a deceased person was an art, not a science, and often a tragic guesswork. The remains were so severely damaged that any clear identification was impossible through physical characteristics alone. There were no photographs of Jean-Marie in any official records, no detailed descriptions that could match the unfortunate discovery. The local gendarmerie and magistrates had to rely on a few crucial, yet incredibly unreliable fragments: scraps of tattered clothing found with the body, an approximate age estimate based on skeletal remains, and crucially, witness opinion. It was a system built on fallibility. Several townspeople, many of whom had known Jean-Marie years prior, were called to view what remained. It was a morbid, unsettling task. Some said the fragments of cloth looked familiar, perhaps the weave or color reminded them of something Jean might have worn. Others thought the general height and build seemed about right for him. No one, absolutely no one, was truly certain. There was no definitive proof, no ironclad evidence pointing unequivocally to Jean-Marie Dupont. But in this era, certainty, it turned out, was not always a prerequisite for legal pronouncements. The state, with its bureaucratic need for order and closure, required a name for the deceased. And Jean-Marie Dupont, with his unexplained years-long absence, his quiet disappearance, became the perfect tragic candidate. He fit the profile of a man who could easily be assigned to the anonymous dead. The local court, meticulously following the limited protocols of the time, reviewed the fragmented testimonies. They compared timelines of Jean's disappearance with the estimated time of death. They considered the opinions, however vague, of the witnesses. And based on this patchwork of circumstantial evidence and human fallibility, they reached a conclusion that, by the standards of the day, seemed reasonable enough. Jean-Marie Dupont was officially declared dead. The decision was signed, stamped, and then meticulously archived in the cold, unfeeling ledgers of the state. With that single administrative act, Jean's legal existence came to an abrupt, chilling end. His civil rights were terminated. Any property associated with his name, however modest, was legally reassigned, redistributed. His name was meticulously moved from the registries of the living to the stark, definitive pages of the death records. The law had spoken. And according to the absolute, unyielding decree of the law, Jean-Marie Dupont no longer existed. For the people who knew him, the ruling, however unsettling in its uncertainty, brought a sense of finality, however uncomfortable. Mourning, tinged with resignation, slowly replaced the years of gnawing uncertainty. Life, as it always does, continued its relentless forward march. The case file was closed, sealed, and forgotten. Jean-Marie Dupont was buried, not in the ground, but in paperwork. But the earth can only hold its secrets for so long. And sometimes, impossibly, the dead refused to stay buried. 3 long, silent years passed since the official declaration of death, years during which the name Jean-Marie Dupont existed only in the cold, unfeeling archives of the state. Life in his home village had settled into a new normal, a quiet acceptance of his presumed fate. The memory of him had become a ghost itself, a faint echo in the minds of those who had once known him. Then, with the sudden jarring force of a nightmare made real, the impossible happened. A man appeared. He was older now, his youth long gone, his body visibly marked by the relentless exhaustion and brutal years of physical labor he had endured. His face was etched with the scars of a hard life, his posture bent under the invisible weight of endless struggle and sheer survival. He walked into the very town Jean-Marie Dupont had once left behind, a stranger in his own homeland, yet intimately familiar with every cobblestone and every face. He walked into the local administrative offices, dusty and filled with the scent of old paper and bureaucratic indifference, and with a quiet, calm voice he stated his name. Jean-Marie Dupont. The reaction was immediate, visceral, and utterly disbelieving. Clerks, their faces initially blank with routine, stiffened. They checked their meticulous, official records. Their brows furrowed in confusion, then alarm. What they found, unequivocally, was that Jean-Marie Dupont was dead. Officially, irrevocably, legally dead. Their ledgers, the unyielding truth of the state, confirmed it. At first, they dismissed him, a confused old man, perhaps a charlatan attempting a brazen fraud, or even someone suffering from a delusion. This man was simply mistaken. The Jean-Marie Dupont they knew was gone. But as the man began to speak, as he recounted details that only a true native could know, something profoundly unsettling began to occur. He knew things only Jean could possibly know. He recognized childhood landmarks, forgotten paths, the unique quirks of the local landscape. He recalled intimate family details, shared memories, specific anecdotes that no imposter, no stranger, could ever possibly fabricate. The sheer depth of his knowledge, the specificity of his recollections, began to chip away at the initial certainty of the clerks. Old acquaintances, hesitant and disbelieving at first, slowly gathered. They listened, they watched, and then the whispers began. Some were genuinely frightened, disturbed by what felt like a ghost returned, a breach in the natural order. Others were deeply shaken, their faith in the legal system, in the very definition of reality, profoundly rattled. Because if this man was telling the truth, if he truly was Jean-Marie Dupont, then the state, the infallible, all-powerful legal system, had made a catastrophic, unthinkable mistake. Not just a clerical error, but an existential one. Jean-Marie Dupont, the man declared dead, stood before them, undeniably alive. He simply demanded the restoration of his identity. He didn't ask for much, only his life back, his name returned to him. But what followed wasn't relief, wasn't an immediate apology or rectification. Instead, there was fierce, institutional resistance. Accepting Jean's astonishing claim meant reopening a closed case, admitting a profound failure on the part of the state, and directly challenging the authority and perceived infallibility of the legal system. The law, in a cruel and ironic twist of its own making, was now trapped in an impossible contradiction. If Jean was truly alive, then the law was undeniably, catastrophically wrong. And legal systems, as we know, do not easily or willingly admit error. The battle for Jean-Marie Dupont's very existence, for his right to simply be, had only just begun. It would prove to be a struggle not just against bureaucracy but against belief itself. The reappearance of Jean-Marie Dupont sent shockwaves through the local community, then slowly, through the broader legal circles. The gravity of the situation was undeniable. The state, faced with irrefutable human proof of its error, reluctantly reopened the case. But this was no ordinary trial, it was a deeply unsettling, unprecedented battle against a legal fiction, a man fighting to prove he was alive when all official records insisted he was dead. The very fabric of their legal certainty was being challenged. The courtroom became a stage for a profound human drama. Witnesses from years past, those who had identified the decomposed body as Jean's, were summoned once again. This time they were forced to confront not a vague memory, but the living, breathing man they had once declared deceased. It was a harrowing experience for all involved. Some, upon seeing Jean-Marie Dupont in the flesh, immediately recognized him, their original doubts and uncertainties from years ago vanishing in the face of his undeniable presence. They openly admitted their previous mistake, their memories now aligning with the man before them. However, others clung fiercely, almost desperately, to the belief that the dead must remain dead. They simply could not or would not accept what their eyes were seeing. For them, it was easier to believe this man was an impostor, a trickster, than to confront the terrifying reality that the state, their ultimate authority, could be so fundamentally wrong. The trial quickly devolved, becoming less about irrefutable scientific evidence, of which there was none in that era, and more about the fallibility of human memory, the weight of official pronouncements, and a pervasive, almost superstitious fear of overturning a definitive legal judgment. The very notion of a dead man returning to life was unsettling, challenging deeply held societal beliefs. At one point, legal scholars and magistrates debated a question that sounded utterly absurd, yet carried immense practical and philosophical weight. Could a man who was legally dead, a non-existent entity in the eyes of the law, even be allowed to testify in his own defense? Could a ghost of the bureaucracy speak in a court of law? It was a paradox that highlighted the profound flaw in their system. Jean-Marie Dupont was caught in a Kafkaesque nightmare, forced to argue for his own existence when the law refused to acknowledge his right to speak. Without modern forensic tools, the court was forced to scrutinize every minute detail of Jean's alleged life. It was an exhaustive, almost intrusive process. His handwriting was compared to old documents, every loop and stroke analyzed for consistency. His intricate knowledge of family history, forgotten village anecdotes, private jokes, and the minutiae of his childhood were rigorously tested, cross-referenced with living relatives and old friends. Childhood injuries, personal habits, even his mannerisms and specific memories were scrutinized under a harsh spotlight, desperately seeking any inconsistency that could dismiss his claim. Slowly, painfully, the evidence accumulated. Not scientific proof, not DNA, but human proof. The weight of personal testimony, the undeniable accuracy of his memories, the growing conviction of those who truly knew him. The truth, however inconvenient and disruptive to the established order, became undeniable. The dead man was in fact alive. The legal system, designed to be immutable, was faced with an irrefutable, living contradiction. The question now was not if he was alive, but whether the law would finally, after years of error, acknowledge that fundamental truth. After months of grueling, emotionally draining hearings, the court finally delivered its verdict. The long-standing death declaration of Jean-Marie Dupont was officially revoked. In a rare and profound admission of error, he was legally restored to life. His name was meticulously returned to the civil registries of the living. His identity, once systematically erased by bureaucracy, was acknowledged once again by the very system that had condemned him. A living man could finally claim his existence, his place in the world, unburdened by the phantom chains of legal non-existence. It should have been a moment of profound triumph, a celebration of justice restored. The bells should have rung in joyful recognition. But Jean-Marie Dupont soon discovered a harsh, bitter truth. Legal recognition, however monumental, did not automatically equate to true justice or restoration. His ordeal was far from over. He found that his property, his meager savings, the small inheritance he might have been due, everything associated with his name was gone. It had been legally reassigned, sold, or distributed during those long silent years he was considered deceased. The law had moved on without him, dissolving his worldly possessions as if they had never existed. His lost time, the trauma of battling for his own identity, the immense emotional and physical suffering he had endured, none of this was compensated. His years of being a legal ghost, his profound injustice, were not acknowledged by the state in any tangible form beyond correcting its records. The law, it seemed, had corrected its ledgers, but it staunchly refused to take responsibility for the devastating damage it had so carelessly inflicted upon a living human being. Jean was alive, yes, but his life had been irrevocably altered, permanently scarred by a system that had treated his very existence as nothing more than a clerical matter, a simple entry in a book. He had won the battle for his name, his fundamental right to exist, but he had lost so much more, his property, his stability, and a piece of his trust in the very institutions meant to protect him. This extraordinary, almost unbelievable case sent profound shockwaves through legal institutions not just in France but across Europe. Governments were forced to confront an uncomfortable, indeed terrifying reality. The definition of death as determined by law was dangerously fragile. It could be declared in error, based on incomplete information and fallible human judgment, and the consequences for the living could be absolutely devastating. Reforms inevitably followed. Identification systems, previously rudimentary, began to improve. Legal standards for declaring death became far stricter, more rigorous, demanding higher degrees of certainty before a life could be officially extinguished. The state, humbled and chastened, learned a powerful, unforgettable lesson. Paperwork alone, no matter how official, should never have the absolute, unchecked power to erase a human being from existence. But even with these reforms, the scars of Jean-Marie Dupont's ordeal lingered, a cautionary tale whispered in legal corridors. Jean-Marie Dupont lived the rest of his life as a man who had, quite literally, been reborn from the pages of a legal document. His identity, once brutally taken from him, was his again, but the experience had left an indelible mark. His case, the man the law killed, transcended mere anecdote. It became a profound, chilling lesson. It was taught in law schools across the continent, cited in countless legal reforms, and forever remembered as a solemn, stark warning against bureaucratic overreach and the dangers of an inflexible system. Because this extraordinary, almost unbelievable case proved something terrifyingly simple, yet deeply profound. Existence is not solely a biological phenomenon. It is intricately woven into our legal frameworks, it is affirmed by our social acknowledgement, and it is meticulously maintained by administrative systems. And when those systems, designed to protect and define us, fail, when they falter or make a mistake, a living person can disappear without ever truly dying. They can become a ghost in the machine, an unperson in the eyes of the law, with devastating real-world consequences. The file on Jean-Marie Dupont was eventually closed. The reforms were implemented, the immediate crisis averted, and his story was carefully tucked away into the dusty annals of legal history. But the fundamental question, the truly unsettling query, remains. It echoes through the centuries, haunting our modern, technologically advanced world with a quiet, persistent dread. In an era where our lives are increasingly digitized, where our identities are stored in vast cloud servers, where algorithms make decisions that impact our credit, our healthcare, our very right to travel, if the law, with all its power and its systems, can declare you dead once, how certain, how absolutely certain, are you that it will never do it again? In our age of data breaches, of sophisticated identity theft, of deepfakes that can blur the lines between reality and fabrication, the story of Jean-Marie Dupont serves as a timeless, urgent reminder of the fragile line between existence and non-existence. It underscores the immense, almost sacred power wielded by the very systems designed to define and protect us. Some case files close. Some truths, however inconvenient or terrifying, refuse to stay buried. And some questions once asked can never truly be forgotten. Thank you for joining us on the story of sets. If this chilling story has made you think, or perhaps made you a little uneasy about the nature of identity and the power of the state, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the hidden corners of history and the unexplained. Until then, remember, not every story is written down and not every truth stays buried.